Dear Father Simon and the collective, forgive me, for I have sinned very much. Many years ago, I worked for a very large company, which we're not going to mention. I was lucky enough to be invited to their annual January shindig at a famously posh hotel just north of Stirling. That is as precise as we're going to get. After a convivial evening, I retired to bed and rose just before 6 a.m. to go for my constitutional early morning run. As I entered the plush lobby in my ridiculous lycra ensemble, a staff member who was lighting one of the many open fires wished me luck, but also warned me, and I quote, to be careful out there in the dark. Okay. Actually, should have said it in the voice of the verger from Dad's Army.
The Scottish verger.
Better be careful out there in the dark. Or maybe not.
That is just one of your voices.
It's actually just a normal voice. Obviously, in my still slightly inebriated state, I ignored his warning. As I stumbled outside into the cold, I soon realised that it was indeed dark, as you would expect before dawn in central Scotland in January. But as my eyes became accustomed to the lack of light, I soon noticed that it was a beautiful clear sky, with millions of stars evident, and a reasonably bright moon too. I began to run on this hotel's famous golf course, narrowed it down a bit, and found no difficulty keeping to the gravel paths which glowed in the moonlight. After about 20 minutes of huffing and puffing, I rounded a corner on the path just as a lone cloud moved in front of the moon, plunging my route into darkness. As I began to slow, trying not to trip in the dark, I immediately ran headlong into my victim. Bang!
Oh, no.
At this point, I should probably point out that I'm not the typical shape of a runner. In fact, my shape is probably more suited to the front row of a rugby scrum. In running terms, I'm approximately 1 Samo Farah tall, but weigh at least as much as, let's say, 2.5 Samo Farahs. So when I ran into my poor, unsuspecting victim, I hit them with sufficient force to elicit a harumph as I knocked the wind out of their sails. I also hit them with enough force to knock them clean off their feet. With my forward momentum suitably diminished, I tripped over their prone form and landed squarely on top of them, which led to another slightly quieter harumph. As it turns out, this person was also quite a hefty unit, and I too was winded as I rolled them onto my back and slowly regained my composure. As soon as I recovered sufficiently, I apologised. "I'm sorry, mate," as we say around these parts. I just didn't see you there. Didn't see you in the dark." To my absolute horror, there was no answer. So again, I apologised. Again, no answer. And I did think that maybe I'd killed them. That would be a confession of a different kind,
Obviously,
wouldn't
that
it?
wouldn't get on.
I wonder what's happening. Here we are on page 2. Oh, there's no page 2. With rising dread, I sat up just as the aforementioned cloud moved past the moon, and the scene of the crime was bathed in the moonlight again. I turned to my victim and was momentarily relieved as they turned to me and stared straight up into my eyes. This relief was fleeting, though, because once my brain caught up, I then screamed with fright, leapt to my feet and ran off into the night at a pace which would have left Samo trailing easily. My victim simultaneously leapt up and went off in the other direction. When I got back to the hotel, the fire-lighting member of staff noticed my agitation, and after I explained why I was even more breathless than most fat businessmen who take on the undulating golf course after a late night, he confirmed that yes, there were stags out there.
Stags?
And that they were known to sleep on the paths. So when I said my victim simultaneously leapt up and went off in the opposite direction, what I meant to say was my victim got back on his 4 hooves and galloped off in the opposite direction, horns glinting in the moonlight. So therefore, I seek forgiveness from the stag, who was minding his own business and did not expect to be mown down by a chartered accountant from Croydon in lycra whilst having a well-earned kip. Needless to say, I now run on main roads in large cities with street lighting. Well, you've got to be very careful, haven't you? You've got to keep your eyes open. You never know who you're going to run into, but you wouldn't expect necessarily to run into a stag and knock the stag off its feet. Sister Bobby, here she goes.
Richard, they told you to be careful. You thought, I'll be all right, it's nothing to be careful of. But you were running in the wrong woods, really, weren't you? What I'm going to say is, I'm not going to forgive you. I'm not going to forgive you because you should have taken care. You should have been aware that may have been livestock. You were very lucky, actually, not to have ended up on one of the end of those horns. So count yourself lucky. Count yourself that he didn't come after you as well, and that you could run fast enough. But you're not forgiven because the livestock take priority in my world. So you are not forgiven.
So the animal's kind of more important, is that what you're saying? Than the humans?
Well, yeah. Yeah, in this world, you're in their environment. Take care of them.
Okay, Nigel.
Now, having done quite a lot of cross-country running at various stages in my life, I loved running in the great outdoors. I didn't really like running in cities or on tarmac or anything, so if you could run across fells, so lucky enough to do that, great. But it doesn't sound to me like Richard is well-suited for this type of running. Certainly at 6 o'clock in the morning, that'll learn him for going out in his lycra in the middle of Scotland in January, when it'll be covered in snow, as it is now, I'm sure. And then for taking out a stag, a new meaning to a stag night, because it was still dark, and in this case, definitely, Ricardo, don't do it, you're not forgiven.
Okay, it's looking tough for you at the moment, Richard.
Well, here's the thing. I go running early in the morning, and I tend to go in the dark.
You run into wildlife all the time.
Well, yeah, I don't want anyone else seeing my purple, sweaty face as I am desperately trying to do 10k in under, an hour and a half. Yeah. So I would absolutely love it, because when I get home, my wife always says, "How was the run?" I would absolutely love to be able to say, "Oh yeah, knocked over a stag. Anyway, I'm off for a shower. Yeah, knocked over a stag." I'd tell that story again.
Do they have many stags?
Not many stags in
Arnos
Grove's worth saying. More's the pity. So I'm going to say forgiven.
Because
Just because,
okay.
I'd love to be able to do that.